Yep, this is a handheld from 1998, the Game Boy Color, but not quite the one you remember, because somewhere along the way, this one's had an AMOLED display fitted in it. A new shell, aftermarket buttons, even fresh AA batteries. And then you turn it on, and suddenly you're playing those old classics, and whatever this is. Just sharper than you've ever seen them before. There's also a touch menu now too, brightness controls, Scan 9 filters, even a little glowing logo under the screen. Nice. And yeah, you can actually play it in the dark now. These are the kind of upgrades that shouldn't feel this satisfying, but they do. And somehow, after all this time, the Game Boy Color still has a little bit of magic left in it. From the crest of the wave that we broke apart. Now, holding this thing again has been kind of strange because it instantly brought back memories I hadn't thought about in years. You know, playing it on the back seat on a long car journey, getting a brand new Game Boy game and reading every single word on the back of the box, twice. It's funny how a little piece of plastic can bring all that back. How about you guys? Do you still remember your first Game Boy game you ever owned? Let me know down below because I'd love to see how many of us started with the same games. So mine was Bubble Ghost, and if you've never heard of this one, it's a little game where you basically play a ghost, guiding a bubble through levels without letting it pop on sharp objects. This game can get quite frustrating, but you know what, I kinda liked it. So the desire to get this Game Boy Color really kicked off after playing with the Retroid Pocket Classic a little while ago. I completely fell in love with that beautiful OLED display, and before I knew it, I was tumbling back down the rabbit hole. That thing felt like a modern love letter to the Game Boy Color, so naturally I ended up buying the real thing. Well, real might be stretching it a little bit. The only real part here is basically the main PCB motherboard, the shelves aftermarket, the buttons are aftermarket, and this drop-in OLED display, also aftermarket. But I promise you, the spirit of the original Game Boy Color is still here. I can feel it. It's just hidden behind everything. But seriously, look at that. That is ridiculous. Now, these OLED kits and modded Game Boy Colors have been around for a little while now, but I never really felt the need to grab one. I even looked at some during my recent trip to Hong Kong, but I resisted and I put a pin on it for another day. But you know what? I chanced upon a used one locally that came with a flash cart thrown in for a pretty good deal, so I jumped on it. It also came with an 8GB micro SD card with a selection of games on it already. And the more I played it, the more I realised something. This hardware is nearly 3 decades old, nearly 30 years, and yet here I am still wanting to pick it up every day. Now, the original Game Boy Color launched all the way back in '98. I actually had the original Game Boy before that, and I loved that thing, but I never picked up the Game Boy Color on release, even though it's far superior on every front. I remember seeing all the Game Boy Color adverts at the time as well. I even handled one in store, and I'm not going to lie, I was so tempted, but I just didn't pull the trigger. And I think a lot of that came down to the fact that I also had a PS1 at the time. Now, compared to the Game Boy Color, that thing felt like the future. So whenever I had a spare bit of money for games, it usually went towards the PlayStation instead. But here we are in 2026, finally in the hands. Better late than never, I suppose. Now, the OLED screen is obviously the star of the show here, but what surprised me most is how much control you get over the image as well. Now, if you touch the bottom of the screen for a few seconds, it brings up a menu. So from here, you can adjust things like brightness, apply Scan 9 filters, change the logo color, and tweak scaling options. It's simple to use and gives you plenty of ways to dial in exactly the look you're after. So the funny thing is, I wasn't completely sold on it at first, because part of me actually preferred the original look. The Game Boy Color was never supposed to be razor sharp. Those soft pixels, the slight blur, even the limitations of the screen back then, that's part of how I remember those games. And when you first see them on an OLED display, it almost feels wrong. It's a bit too clean and a bit too modern. But the longer I spent with it, the more I realised something. The OLED just makes those games easier to revisit, I guess, especially for people that are used to a modern display. Now, I will admit, I'm used to bigger screens these days, so the touch controls felt a little cramped at first, but they're perfectly usable. Now, this flash cart is pretty neat. It looks like one of those generic ones you can get everywhere. In fact, I think it is, but it's surprisingly quick and I've had zero issues with it so far. One little feature I really like as well is that you can press the back of the cartridge to instantly jump back to the game menu, which is pretty handy. It also has a really satisfying click to it as well. Small thing I know, but I like it. Games are listed alphabetically, and because the screen is so small, you have to flick through pages to find what you're after. But thankfully, it's pretty responsive, so it never feels slow. And maybe it's just me, but do you ever find yourself enjoying older hardware more as you get older? And look, I know I could play all these games on one of my modern handhelds. In fact, I have. But there's something about using the original hardware that just feels nice. It feels clean. There's only two buttons here. And the size of this, it just feels really nice in the hands. Even swapping batteries out as well. None of it's convenient, but somehow that's part of the appeal. So I've mostly been playing those quick pick up and play games. Stuff like Motocross Maniacs 2, which is one of my favourite games. Another regular is Mr. Driller. It's funny, 20 years ago, I would have been chasing whatever the newest game was. These days, I'm perfectly happy spending an evening with games I've owned half my life. And another favourite of mine to play on here is Pokemon Pinball. This game is just brilliant, a real time stealer this one. So I actually prefer using the original cartridge for this game, mainly for the rumble motor, which was a pretty cool feature back then, I guess. So it's powered by a single AAA battery, and it's a small detail, I know, but it adds so much charm to the experience. I've also been checking out some of the newer releases, and honestly, some of them are really impressive. It's amazing to see people still making games for a system that's well over 25 years old. So yeah, I've been really impressed by this OLED mod. I know these kits have been around for a good while now, but actually experiencing one in person with my own eyes is completely different. More than anything, it's reminded me why people fell in love with the Game Boy and Game Boy Color in the first place. That form factor is still hard to beat. There's also something really satisfying knowing these old machines are still kicking around. What surprised me most though is just how well the experience holds up. Sure, it's old hardware, but with a modern display like this, it still feels incredibly enjoyable to pick up and play, even today in 2026. And honestly, that's kind of amazing. Because somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten just how magical the Game Boy Color could be.